You could be 3 streets away, but it's just the pocket and the area of that suburb that's attracting a higher price or a lower price. I just don't want to search listings or coming listings. I want to search opportunities.
Our motto is buy without regrets, and so
If you can buy a property that will serve you for 10 years as opposed to 3 years, that will serve you well. It's something.
Buying a great property today, that's not just what it's about. It's also getting something that could be ripe for improvement when the time is right for that investor or for the next buyer.
You think about, right, lifestyle, what's important to you? How do you get to work? What do you need for your family? What amenities like parks and shops? Then you look at the budget.
Welcome to Street Secrets. I'm Chris Bates. I'm a mortgage broker since 2013. And in this podcast, we're going to be interviewing Australia's leading buyer's agents, ones with decades of experience, have the local insider knowledge on the street, and can really help you with your buying process, no matter whether you're a first home buyer, upgrader, investor. In this podcast, you'll get access to Australia's leading buyer's agents' minds every week on a Thursday. What's the word on the street? Welcome to Street Secrets. I'm Chris Bates. In the studio today with Shane Hiscock from Locate Buyers Agency in Brisbane. It's going to be an interesting chat. Obviously, we're not talking so much about the Brisbane market, but it's an interesting time. We're recording this in the sort of middle of August, but also we're going to have a bit of a tilt to sort of buying in the Brisbane market. And if you don't want to go through a build yourself, Shane's got a lot of experience in helping clients buy, finished houses, I guess, for owner-occupiers. So it's going to be a good chat today. Thanks for coming on, Shane.
Thanks very much, Chris. Very excited to be here. Can't wait to chat about a few things in the Brisbane market and what's happening.
Absolutely. And you've worked with a number of clients and with our team that are actually in Brisbane as well, and had some great results. And but before we sort of, if people don't know who you are and Locate, can you talk a bit about your history coming into BA, how long you've been a buyer's agent and what were you doing before?
Yep, perfect. So very short snapshot. Grew up in the bush, did a business degree in Wagga Wagga at Charles Sturt University. Started working for the biggest company I could because that was my parents' advice, which was IBM Australia at the time. I hated IT. On my way to work every day, I started to take different routes and see what was going on in the property market. That was spurred on because my wife and I were looking to buy our first home. And then I started just to really get out and amongst the suburbs and research the areas and see what was happening with property. And I loved being out and about, firstly. Secondly, I love seeing the leverage that you could get and achieve from property. I looked at the CPI increases I was getting in my salary at the time and thought I'm never going to save my way to actually creating some more wealth in my life. So that excited me. And also, I guess it was just the opportunity that it afforded us. And so what happened was I then decided to learn as much as I could. I did a mentoring program from a guy you probably know, Steve McKnight. He wrote some great books back in the day, 0 to 135 properties in 3.5 years, I think was the first one, right? So I did this mentoring program for 12 months and it gave you a broad brush understanding of 15, 20 different types of property development and value add type of strategies. And then I went about looking into doing my own first project, and that ended up being a new build. So I found a block of land in a neighbouring suburb, built a new house, and the goal was to make enough money to then step into property as a full-time gig. So I learnt a lot. I built a house. It had 17 changes of foreman. The industry was going nuts at the time, so foremen were up and leaving every 3 or 4 weeks so that they could go and get more money on a high rise in the middle of Brisbane somewhere, right? This is just pre-GFC. And so we went through the GFC while building, made all the mistakes that you could, moved in, and then it took us about a year though to realise what we wanted to out of it. And lucky for me, I made the profit that I was looking for. And then I gave my boss 12 months notice and said, I'm quitting work in 12 months. And then, someone came to me from IT and said, can you help me buy a property? I did all the research, helped her. And she said, how do I pay you? I said, I don't have anything, any structural service offering set up. She said, oh, well, you did what a buyer's agent does. And so, that's how she remunerated me. So from then I went, this is great. I love doing this. I'm going to set up a buyer's agency. So that was the first iteration, but it wasn't Locate then. It was a different company. My focus then was finding development sites and then I would put the feasibility together for the clients. We joint venture on the project, and I went and did 33 projects that way from 2010 to 2018. And then 2018 onwards, I decided to pivot. I bought a house for one of your clients, actually, a doctor. He was really great to work with, and he really appreciated the knowledge that I had around property and fixtures and fittings and the houses and what we were walking through. And he would say, why does that house feel different to that house? And I'd be like, well, that marble's worth 3 times as much as that one, and that's got this. He's like, oh, okay, I get it. And that was his owner-occ, and I really loved the experience, and I loved that he appreciated that we were able to help him. And I decided to pivot into more owner-occupier buying from then. And we started Locate Buyers Agency in 2020. And so that's been our main focus. We're about 70% owner-occupier, 30% investor. That can fluctuate just depending on when Brisbane's the flavour of the month for investing or not. But we're certainly designed around owner-occ.
Yeah, I think it's always interesting, right? I mean, you've had it's 20 years now of, playing around in the Brisbane market. I think, if you had to sort of, break it down into, the journey, I mean, obviously you've had a lot of development and sort of the buying. I mean, what is the sort of the last, when you've shifted to a owner-occupier, sort of helping people buy homes versus sort of developing, what's some of the learnings you've sort of had to accrue over the years where maybe things you did, 5-10 years ago, now I guess would made a better decisions?
Wow, that's a big question. There's a lot in there. So, wow, what are some of the things I've learned? I think one of the best things I learned in development, actually, that I carried through to helping owner-occ was the importance of the precinct within a suburb. And so how I learned that was, you'd see a house sell, and let's say it's on a 400 block and it's 4-bed, 2-bath, it's got certain config. You'd call an agent and say, if I move that house in the same suburb but over to this street, what would it get? So all I'm changing is the location, and they would say, oh, if you put it there, you get another 200,000. And I'm like, oh, wow, that's interesting. What if I put it over here? Oh, you wouldn't get as much. You'd get like only 100K less. Okay, that's interesting. So that's a very simple way to put what I now work with owner-occs on is like there's A, B, C, D precincts within a suburb. So you can't judge the value of a house when you're looking to buy, for yourself on, oh, well, it looks the same and it's got the same amount of bedrooms and it's got a pool as well. You could be 3 streets away, but it's just the pocket and the area of that suburb that's attracting a higher price or a lower price. I could catch you out both ways. That was,
I like that. I think
thing.
Sometimes clients really struggle with that, right? It's the, you get to this point, you're buying the suburb, and then, how do you sort of know which is the better part, and is it what premium is it? And sometimes I guess the best way to think about it is the same type of house in different parts, would be all valued different. And I think, nothing like a developed finished product, for example, that, you can easily sort of understand that. In terms of sort of the Brisbane market, and, obviously it's gone through a crazy run over the last few years, and, how do you sort of help clients figure out whether they should do the build themselves? A lot of people do want a finished house, right? Ultimately, and some aren't built for doing renovations. I've gone through one myself, and I understand the pain, the decision fatigue. But how do you sort of guide clients and making sure they get a really good product at the end of it, right? That's going to stand the test of time.
Yeah, I think there's a number of things that you need to hit on when we're working with a client on what I sometimes run as a dual brief. But one of the first key things is understanding their requirements in the house for the layout and the fixtures and fittings and features. Is it so unique that the only way they're going to get what they want is that they need to build? Or because if it is, then okay, that's fine. But is it that it's just they like the feel of that, or they like the style of something, or they, or is it, sometimes it can just be there's a really unique requirement that, like, I don't know, we need 2 uncreated bedrooms downstairs or something, right? Which is very rare. You're just not going to find it in any new build. No one's going to do it. That's a really rare example. But let's say it wasn't, and it was more that you want something fresh and new, then the next thing as well that we work through is considering your stage of life and what's happening for you. So the best example, or not the best, but one example is where if you have children that are at teenage years And your whole purpose of buying this nice, great new house for yourself is that you want to enjoy it with your kids, but it's going to take you 3 years to build and then they're possibly going to leave, then that's sort of going to, my advice is going to be just go straight into the house you can enjoy as soon as possible. And we've done this recently with a family who are looking for a substantial home, and they'd been looking for a couple of years, and their eldest children were sort of year 12 and year 9 kind of age. And they wanted, obviously, to have this house for those purposes. And so the time was running out. We needed to find something that was finished and ready to go rather than go through that whole build process. So that's the second part, the lifestyle, the stage of life. The next part then does become often if it's somewhere where someone says, well, I don't have kids yet, or I'm about to start a family, or my kids are younger, so it can take a couple of years. I'm happy to build or buy. Then the process for that I generally run like side by side, because it'll differ in differing markets as to when it makes sense to do one or the other more or not, right? So I'll give you an example around that. Right now, because there's a bit of softness in the top end, there's a little bit more room to negotiate. But what we're still experiencing, and we have for 10, 15 years in Brisbane, is that the original site price, which is the raw site or the house that you can knock over or renovate, has continued to go up in value because they become more scarce. So in the 10, 15K ring, every year, 10 houses get built in a suburb, there's 10 less sites available. So the value of the raw land is going up. So is the construction price. So right now in Brisbane, there's an opportunity to buy a finished product that is less than the replacement cost. But I've seen this cycle before, and it won't last. I've been through it multiple times. Other times, let's say 6 to 12 months ago, maybe even 6 to 12 months ago in certain suburbs, builders would have that raw site, build it, and then they're getting premiums on top. Yeah. Like they're maybe getting 300-500 more than what they kind of expected, right? And that's where people switch and go, well, hang on, and we do the numbers as well. We go, hang on, we can buy the site and build it, and you'll come out better off in a year or two's time when you do it. So they're the two scenarios that we run side by side when we're helping people to make that decision, so that it then becomes very clear. And the important part there is understanding what do things cost to build and how long does it take, and et cetera, because, I go through this a lot of times where you can look at two houses that look the same, but we run through the fixtures and fittings, and one costs $3,500 a metre to build and the other's $4,500 a metre. But to the untrained eye, they look similar. So that's a really important thing as well, because the big mistake I see is people jumping into it thinking it'll cost me, they get a quote from maybe a larger builder that says, you can do this for $1 million. But then the reality is that's very basic fixtures and fittings, very basic sort of, materials, et cetera, versus what they've been looking at would be another $500,000.
Yeah, I mean, I can see enormous value in that, right? Because, we're obviously, like you say, the top end has come back, harder because borrowing capacity is really tight. People fearful of rates, people are conscious about trying to go into a lot of debt right now. The bottom ends, everyone's budgets have been sort of compressed. But you're right. If you try to maybe go back a year or two, probably the opposite, right? The premium finished product, when everyone was sort of, really confident around sort of, short-term growth. They're like, if I don't buy that, so it's going to take me 3 years, and, I might as well just get something finished. I'm worried about a builder going on. So I think you've got to be really conscious. I think the stage of life thing's, really valuable, right? And how long is it really going to take? And have you, got enough buffer if building prices run on you? When you're thinking about sort of that, younger family sort of, helping them think through the reno, do you think that one of the biggest value adds is just making sure they don't buy something with a renovation? It's just not possible. I've seen that mistake just happen so many times over the last few years where, everyone wants to get into a suburb, and the only way to get in is basically buying this renovated, but the actual ability to actually do the renovation just seems to be getting out of, everyone's reach, and they get stuck in an unrenovated home, basically.
Yeah, we see that quite a bit because they're underestimating what it really costs and how much it really takes to go through that renovation. And you'll see it often where then they'll be in that house and they'll get a set of plans, and sometimes even we see 2 and 3 sets of plans because they've maybe there's a better way. We'll get someone else to, and there's multiple sets of plans that happen, and really with that buyer as well, it's often a process of working through with them as well. Well, hang on, when we're buying this property that you do want to renovate, how much do you want to spend? How long do you think what can we buy for that finished number already? If that's what your intention was, what can we also buy for that? Can we have a look? Why don't we have a look at that marketplace as well? Because it's the same thing as the new build scenario where it will reveal itself once you can run through and do those figures and do those numbers. But again, the stage of life thing's really important. We just bought a house for renovation for 2 young lawyers, and they know that they'll not necessarily go for the renovation straight away. They'll sit there, build some equity for a couple of years. And because they're just at the start of their careers, kids are still probably 5-8 years away. So they'll certainly have some time to build all of that up. Their careers, in terms of considering stage of life, will only increase in terms of income as well. So their borrowing and everything else will go up as they move along. So that what becomes then important for those types of buyers is getting the location right, because you can't change that, obviously. You can't renovate the location. So it's like, where do you want to be? What do you want to have access to? What do you want to walk to? And it's really then making sure we dial in on the position of the property.
Yeah, what part of Brisbane was that property? I mean, not saying the actual suburb, but, the pocket, and, what were some of the common sort of, pieces of land that you had to sort of avoid, and what were some of the mistakes in that pocket that are common?
Yeah, so that was in the inner western suburbs. I'm happy to say the suburb if you want.
Yeah, it's fine, yeah.
Yep. So that was in Ashgrove. Common things to look out for in the area. It's quite hilly in the area. So it's like how much slope is on the site, because that really adds to your building costs and your renovations, right?
Yeah, for sure.
There's the obvious overland flow and flooding factors that you need to look into here in Brisbane. Which way it faces. Is it west facing at the rear or north? South or east or west, north, south, east, west.
Yeah.
West is obviously going to hit a lot of sun.
Yeah.
It's not always great, but it can be okay depending on what's behind you, of course. Yeah. So these sort of factors all come into consideration when you're buying these properties, as well as then, I guess, the style of home. There's the early cottage, which is just kind of like the straight roof, the early 1900s, or do you prefer the pitch roof with the gables? All these kind of things come in.
Yeah, making sure it matches the sort of streetscape and the neighbours, and, it's actually achievable on that sort of block of land. I mean, we've always been fans of buying sort of, inner houses on quiet streets, with good aspect that are got great privacy, and, you could buy that up in Brisbane for 600,000, 700,000, 800,000 in a ring suburb, 10 years ago. But, there was a bit of a boom in the outskirts of Brisbane. I mean, and particularly sort of when you start getting, 20, 30 Ks away from the city, down sort of south or north or even to the west. So how did you sort of, do you get clients involved in those areas? They've obviously run really hard. How do you feel, I guess, when the market sort of cools off?
I feel like you do have to be a little careful with those areas and ideally get in earlier rather than later. They tend to be the last ones to go up in the cycle, but then when things tend to shift, they tend to be the first to drop down. Although we've not really bought along the outskirts of Brisbane for probably a good year or two now. No, not quite a year or two, but it'd be, at least a year. When we were talking federal elections recently and the changes were talked about coming in, I was predicting at the time that prices will all move 50, 100 grand easily as soon as they change the minimums for the first home buyers from 750 to $1 million, and watch it move. And so we had a few buyers in the market at that time on the outskirts, and we made sure to get in as soon as possible. And then since then, it's really pushed all of those prices right up now. So trying to buy a house now in Brisbane though under $1 million is pretty difficult. But I'd apply then the same principle if I'm buying inner or outer to protect my clients as much as possible. Instead of I think there's just this kind of view around that you kind of do this high level suburb research and that suburb's booming, so just buy there. Whereas countless times I've seen people buy properties that they're just completely wrong position. There's some issues with it that can't be changed in terms of where it is, or maybe the block shape's really odd. And so when markets tighten, they stay close to quality. It just happens every time, right? So we can still maintain that same philosophy in the outer suburbs, even if it does tighten. But we've brought in, like you said before, quiet street, no flood, good elevation, normal shaped block, not something weird. It seems more cookie cutter, but ideally we want to buy something that both an owner-occupier or an investor will want to buy, so that you increase your buyer pool at any stage of trying to sell that property. But if market cools and you do need to do something, and you have bought one of the quality properties, not one of the ones like one block from the main road or with a weird shape or bit of flooding on it, then you're going to be the one that's more protected.
Yeah, I think you made some good points. I mean, that was one of the challenges when you're buying hot markets, right? And, and there's just this flood of new first-home buyers or investors in the market. It's not just buying in the suburb, right? It's what you buy within that. And, when that buyer demand does cool or listings start increasing, how does yours compare? Is it desirable? Is it the one that, the seagulls fly to the chip analogy, or is it the one that sort of, oh yeah, it's not that, I'd rather just keep waiting. I've got choice now. And so I think that's what's absolutely going to play out now as the sort of market cools. And that's just not in, say, Brisbane, for example. It's across any part of the country. If you think about Brisbane though, how do you, for clients that've got quite flexible briefs, how do you sort of guide them to help them pick the right pocket, I guess, that's going to suit them? When you're working with the owner-occupiers, it's such a big decision, and a lot of people might not have grown up in Brisbane, they might be moving there. So how do you sort of guide them to kind of find what's the right hood for them?
Well, I mean, it really comes back to just, understanding your client, obviously, but it's considering things like we had a call with a client coming on board from the Northern Territory last night. And so we were discussing with them, and they're coming here to bring before the kids get to high school. So it's like, which high schools do you want to go to? Why do you want to go to those schools? Where have you got friends? Where have you got a support network? What do you like fishing? Do you like golf? What do you like to do? Where's your, where are all those hobby areas, et cetera, et cetera. So we're going to run through those sorts of parameters. These guys had a reasonably good idea of where they wanted to be, but then let's say you don't, and we did a lot of this through COVID, where a lot of people were moving up from Melbourne, and I helped a lot of people with that move. So I find getting to know where they live and where they've grown up has always been a help. Even buying for clients here in Brisbane, like, where did you grow up, or which part of the suburb? Where was that? Because buying an owner-oc's about a feeling first, and then I say you buy emotionally, you justify logically. So it's about understanding then what that feeling is that the buyer's trying to replicate or find. And as well, say for example, this Melbourne client I can think of, where we were looking on all sides of the city, the suburbs ended up all having similar characteristics, if you like. Because you're like, okay, these are kind of fairly premium areas. They're nice, great schools, nice wide streets, bigger blocks. They're fairly close to the city. Yeah. But you'll find just slight nuances within each of them in terms of, and I call it the property triangle, where you've got, we work and refer to these points all the time, which is the property itself. So, the size of it, the fixtures, the fittings, the layout, what's the quality of the dwelling, the property. Yep. Then there's the position. So that's again in a particular suburb. Where is it positioned? Do you need to be in the premium position or don't? And when I say position, I also think about parcel or land. So how big does the land need to be? Do you need elevation? Which way should it look? Et cetera, et cetera. And then the next part is the price. So we're always balancing these three up. And what you'll find when you're helping an owner-occ is that, like, some come to me and show me a picture of a house, go, I want a house like that. And okay, great. You go and find them a house like that, and they go to the area and they go, oh, this doesn't quite feel like, it's not quite my vibe, this area. So great. Let me show you something then. What you want is a better area. So we're probably going to have to compromise maybe on the size of that house a little bit, or maybe it's not brand new and it's been built 3 or 4 years ago, but it's in a better pocket. Let's see what we can find for you there. I guess it's a process that we work through, and I actually love the fact that you'll get the feeling, you'll notice what the client responds to by going through the opens with them and seeing what they like and seeing what they love. Like the client that we've worked on multiple times now and helped that's financed through yourselves as well. The house we recently purchased for him, we went through in 2 days, I think 8 properties. And some were really big, some were smaller, some were modern, some were character. But going through those 8 and seeing those reactions and the one that we ended up buying, I knew it from 3 days before that it was going to be the right house, because I'm like, I've been in it. Went through it when it was built 5-6 years earlier. I knew who built it. I knew the quality of the guy who built it, and I knew what the client was looking for. And I'm like, I think this is going to hit the nail right on the head. And it did. And that's what I love about how we work through things with Owner-Occs. But yeah, I think I've answered.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think it's really valuable. I think people maybe underestimate, it's because I get access to off markets. No, a lot of the guidance, particularly around owner occupiers, even if you think a suburb you want to be, most people are a little bit flexible. They, open to exploring other pockets if it means they get a better property or a dwelling in a better position, and they can, maybe that's a little bit, I can make that work, that commute, and the schools are fine there. And I think particularly if people are moving in areas maybe where they're not renting, or their first home or their apartment's just not where they're going to have their forever home. And there's a lot of work in guiding people. I think you're adding a lot of value around, particularly when they're exploring a lot of new builds. I think, I've worked with a few different buyers agents in different pockets, and, I've come from building backgrounds. And I think that's for some clients, they find a lot of value in that, who don't want to go through the radar or do want to do it and know what's possible. If you think about the Brisbane, every city's got a challenge right now with not enough supply, right? And they're going to, population is increasing at a national level and the city level, and we're going to have to, continue to build, and zoning changes and building changes are happening. How do you feel that's going to play out in Brisbane, and how do you sort of make sure you stay across that and, make sure that clients, are protected from, the future of building within Brisbane?
Yeah, so there's a few layers to that. Obviously, we're looking at zoning changes and what's coming. The council's, fairly good at keeping people up to date on that, but also just liaising with town planners. Town planners often will know what's coming sooner rather than later. There's some proposed changes with regard to, you could subdivide a 600 block that was 200 metres from a centre zone that came out 2018. They're going to change that probably to 300. I think the obvious thing that is coming is that the council will need to increase density closer to infrastructure and services. It just makes more sense than trying to extend services and infrastructure in the outskirts of the city, right? And so we know of areas where zoning's going to be changing from low to medium density to medium density. Those kinds of things. And you can use that to benefit your client or to protect, either or, right? So protect is obviously when we're buying, and we didn't buy a property the other day that we saw off market because we know the property sitting in front of it has had a DA going through for multiple levels that would completely block the view. So that's a protect mechanism. I didn't buy something last year for a client where I noticed behind it, and I actually searched on commercial real estate to find the site. I found a site behind. There's a bit vacant bit of land behind there. I wonder what's going on there, right? So I'm like, let me have a look. I couldn't find anything residentially, so I was like, could have been sold commercial. And I found it had a DA approval for 62 townhouses on it. And I downloaded the DA and I went, okay, each of these has a double car combination, like tandem or side by side. So we have a potential of 120 odd cars coming up and down. Oh, hang on, which streets? There's one street to access, and it's going to take them 2 years to build it. So I said to the client, look, you need to know this. I think you should swerve clear of it. So that's how we're just going to do that level of due diligence when we're buying in the areas to see what's coming or not. But then I think as well, there's another way that it's valuable to look at that information, and you look at big companies like Greyer, who are a big developer here in Brisbane. They've just bought a site for 40 million next door to that. Fortis, who are a huge developer of luxury property in Sydney, bought a site for 30 million. We had Tenerife Bank's Kokoda. So we're seeing density and higher value properties in the premium pockets, which then is something just to consider for whether you're buying in those areas. There's going to be more stock, more supply coming, but generally it's going to be fairly different to some of what's there. But also I think it sends a signal, and I always beg the question and ask myself, what are they looking at that's giving them the confidence in the marketplace as well? And even just a good tip is I jump onto the wholesale investor side of things with companies like Stockwell or Sentinel Property Group, who have the wholesale funds, and we invest a little through that. And I jump onto their webinars and seminars because they do commercial, they do residential, they do all sorts of things. And when you read the IM, you can see what they're looking at, like office vacancies, they're looking at transport connections, they're looking at Brisbane one of the stats I heard recently was like 3% of the world knows about Brisbane. By the Olympics, 90% of people will know about Brisbane. There's a lot of good information that I think is important to pass to buyers to help them see a long-term confidence in what they're doing.
Yeah, that's a really good tip, actually. I might actually put that in my bank and have a look. But I think you're right. I think, that sort of St. James Priest, I think that's what you're talking about. I think that's a kind of like, and that's a bit of a canary in the coal mine. Like I'm not saying it's a bad coal mine, but, you can see the shift in terms of, what would potentially be getting built over the coming years versus previously a very high-end product they're building, obviously. But, it's not a high density sort of as build them as quick and as fast and as cheap as you can. But, it's going to shift, like a city's, it's happening in Sydney, it's happening in Melbourne. I think it's just really important to be across those things. And it sounds like you've got you've got a passion about it and you've done that. Are you actually doing developments yourself now? Or are you helping clients through that are considering buying sites and building? I mean, whether they're building to, just to sell or to keep or, I think with obviously this budget change, there might be an appetite to build stuff for investors that, maybe it's not high density apartments, could just be small lots and townhouses in rings.
Yeah, we're not developing anything ourselves. So we stuck to the buy and hold strategy for the last little while. But because of my background with development, there are a number of builders or professional developers that we still help buy sites for. The last one we bought was, exactly what I've been speaking about, which was the knockdown, build a brand new big house in a good street, quiet spot, et cetera, et cetera. So we help, because we cover that ground a lot, and we've also just built, I mean, we haven't even talked AI, but, everyone talks AI, right? We've built what we call the property universe here in Brisbane. So we built the database of every single house that exists in Brisbane, and we've cross-referenced it with a number of different sites to be able to have all the parameters around it. And then we've built our own search tool where we go, Chris, what are you looking for? I want a new build in Paddington that's got a 600 block that's not west facing and it has no flood, built in the last 5 years. We can plug all that in and give me a whole list of everything. Likewise, for the development side, we have show me every post-war house that exists in these 4 suburbs on the north side that meets this criteria. And so we then build our own target lists out. So that's how we're helping those guys. Probably less the guys looking at, say, new build in the outer suburbs of Brisbane. Because I think if you're going to develop, I know when I was, you need to know triple, quadruple the amount of information than you do for other. So you want to know what other sites transacting for, what's my build cost for and what level of product do I need to build and what's it going to transact at on the other side. So I'm not sitting across that in the outskirts of Brisbane as much. I feel like but in my areas, I know that very well. So I can go, hey, Chris, here's a site. You should build a house of this level on there, I think, and you should be able to get it exited around this number. I don't have that. I can't provide that level of service in the outskirts, but I just
I like that sort of categorizing the properties. I think the biggest challenge we often see with clients is they sort of know what they can borrow, they sort of know what they want, but they also maybe not sure whether they can get it for the price they want it. They don't know how many have sold like that in the last 6-12 months. Realistically, how narrow is their brief, and how long is it going to take to buy that, and if they do find it, how scarce is it, to what do they pay? And so I feel like there's all those, chasing that sort of needle in the haystack can be extremely costly, because you're sort of looking for this dream outcome that just may not happen, and markets don't sort of wait. Sometimes it's in your interest, right? Market could be not moving and you could find that there's no pressure, maybe it's either life or market, but sometimes it can be the opposite, and not having that real clarity on what's actually achievable with your brief up front, and go, well, no, I need to have multiple different strategies in place, dual or triple different suburbs and different types of brief. It sounds like you sort of really test that up front.
100%, and we do test that up front, but we do also say then is your evidence just what's on realestate.com? Because that's not everything, right? And that's why I'm, saying that we go, I just don't want to search listings or coming listings. I want to search opportunities, because if I can do that, I could double, triple what I could bring to you as a client. instead of just going, well, here's the listings, and I call every single agent, which we do. We do 150 calls each person a day, just calling the agents, going, what's coming? And that's where the relationship helps us get more access. But then when I reverse that and go, well, and here's everything that could potentially suit your brief, I've changed the available pool potential, and then we go on I guess a more of a fact find and deep dive into like, how do we connect with all these owners? But the bigger other part of the equation that I think confuses the market, confuses buyers, slows them down, is pricing. And so that's the other key thing. Whilst we can find a lot more options and opportunities, it comes down to then not wasting your time on the wrong ones, but also realizing, I think, that as a buyer, you're typically coming in and negotiating against a sales strategy, a campaign. It's called a campaign, for a sales campaign, for a reason. It's not anchored on what's the property really worth. It's anchored on how do we get the best out of it, right? So it could be offers over this level, but they know it's worth here, but they're trying to stretch and get a bit more because they want to cause that frenzy. Or maybe, usually I find this is when the vendor's opinion's stronger, where they go, I'm not pricing down there, and they say, put it up here because then we can make people feel like they get a discount and we still might get here. That scenario is what I find confuses most buyers that come to us. And when they're confused, they can't make, it's hard to make a decision as a buyer, which is completely understandable. That's where we bring in all that, what I call the locate value method that we design, to help them know which strategy is being used, and then we can understand how we're going to buy for them.
And it's not to say that, everyone's done it myself. I've worked with buyer's agents every time, but I'm also, awful at, hiding my emotions and tell the agent too much. And I'm like, I even with professionals, they just tell me to shut up. But I think you're right. Like, it's like once you get to this, okay, we've got the property, but how you make your offer, what you offer, how you, that's where I think a lot of people get unstuck. And the problem is they realize too late that they sort of maybe don't know what they're doing, and they don't know what the right thing to do is. And then they maybe giving too much information, and they sort of tie themselves, they're not. And the one that they really want sort of runs away. I think it's a pretty painful lesson, I'd find. And I think that, that's where a great BA often just makes sure that they have the best chance of securing it. Obviously, there's always a time where sometimes you have to walk away, but, you don't miss that one that you wish you caught. Shane, it's been a really good chat. I do think that, particularly anyone working in the Brisbane market, want to buy in the Brisbane market, but, want to go on a bit of a journey and consider buying something that's, newly built. Just because it's new doesn't mean it's, a good property, right? And so you've got to be extremely careful what you buy. And I think you'd be in safe hands with you and your team.
Thank you very much, Chris. It's been great to chat with you today.
Thanks so much for listening today. We hope you got lots of value out of it. If you'd like to speak to our guest today, there's links in the show notes on how you can get in contact. And if you're buying your first home, upgrading, renovating, or need any finance-related queries, obviously we'd love to help. There's links in the show notes to us as a mortgage broker, and we look forward to next week's episode.